everyone. Today I'm going to model for you the objective that we're going to be working on this week, and it is to compare and contrast the story elements of fairy tales. So last week you recorded the story elements of different fairy tales relating to the traditional story, The Three Little Pigs. This week we're going to be comparing and contrasting those story elements, comparing and contrasting different versions of that traditional storyline. I'm going to model today comparing and contrasting the original version, The Three Little Pigs, to the story that you read on Tuesday, the true story of The Three Little Pigs. Now, what you see on the screen are my notes from when I was listening for story elements. I'm going to have to look back in my notes to compare and contrast the two stories, just like you. So you'll have to go back into your Google Classroom and open this document to help you compare and contrast later this week. What I'm going to do as I look through my notes is go through each story element and just pay attention to what's the same and what's different about the stories. So, for example, in the Three Little Pigs, the original version, the setting, it takes place in a country town, and our good characters build their homes from straw, sticks, and bricks. When I look to the true story of the Three Little Pigs, I can remember that the story also took place in a country town, and the pigs also built their homes from the same materials. So I know when I start charting story elements and comparing and contrasting, this is going to be a comparison, something that's the same. Now I'm going to look at narrator. The narrator is the person telling the story. In the Three Little Pigs, it was a third person narrator. And a third person narrator is someone who's not involved in the story at all, but instead it's someone outside of the story so that you get the perspective of an outsider. That's different from the narrator in the true story of the Three Little Pigs. The big bad wolf, also known as Alexander T. Wolf, is telling us the story. I knew that because right from the beginning, the narrator was using the pronoun I, so I knew the narrator was a character within the story. So that's a difference. I have a character outside of the story and a character, or I have a narrator outside of the story and a character within the story narrating. Now I'm going to look at my good characters. In the original story, the Three Little Pigs are the innocent, good characters. When I look to the true story of the Three Little Pigs, the good characters, especially given that this is from the perspective of the wolf, is the wolf himself. He's innocent, he's a good character. Our evil characters in the original, the big bad wolf. However, in the true story of the Three Little Pigs, our evil characters are the Three Little Pigs, so the roles have reversed in these two versions. The problem in the original is that the big bad wolf is blowing their houses down and trying to eat them up. But when I look to the problem of the true story of the Three Little Pigs, I remember from reading that the wolf was really just trying to make a birthday cake for his dear old granny and ran out of sugar. So he went to ask his neighbors to borrow some, and he kept sneezing and blowing their house down, completely an accident. And before leaving, of course, he had to eat the first two pigs for dinner. But it wasn't so much that he was going out to be malicious. So I remember that was the difference. And my solution, my box will go away. In the original story, the wolf's not able to blow the third house, so he tries 3 times to trick the little pigs into coming out. And finally, the wolf tries to climb down the chimney and he falls into a pot of boiling water, and the evil character is no more. In the true story of the Three Little Pigs, the fractured version, the police come to the scene. They see the wolf trying to blow the house down. The news reporters found out that the wolf ate the first 2 pigs, and they made him look like the bad guy. So the wolf gets locked up and locked away. In both stories, I notice that the wolf is punished, even though their role in one story he's the bad guy, and in the other story he is not. So I'm going to use the information that I have recorded from last week to compare and contrast. And this is what I filled out. So remember, when we compare and contrast, we want to see how the story elements are alike, that's comparing, and different, that's contrasting. Like a Venn diagram, if the two stories have a story element that's the same, I'm going to place that in the alike column. It's like the intersection in a Venn diagram. And if the story element is different in both stories, I'm going to put it under each story's title. So I'm going to start with setting. Just like in our story elements, I'm going to have the same order. Setting, that was something that was the same. It was set in a country town. The house materials were the same. The narrators were different. Remember, the narrators are not the authors of the story. It's the person who's telling the story. And the author can decide to use a third person narrator or pretend and use a character in the story itself. My good characters was another difference. We've got the three little pigs and we've got the big bad wolf in the other version. My bad characters are reversed. My problem: in the original story, the wolf is mean and keeps wanting to get to the pigs so that he can eat them. And then in the opposite end, in the true story of the three little pigs, the wolf just needed a cup of sugar for Granny's cake, and the pigs wouldn't share, so he sneezed and knocked them down. And he ate two perfectly good pigs because he couldn't just leave them there. Now, a similarity between these two is that the wolf is still blowing houses down, and he still wants to eat the pigs. So in this section, you'll notice I have some differences and some similarities. So the problem, although maybe slightly different, they do share some things in common. And then the solution ends up being quite a bit different. In the traditional story, the wolf can't blow the house down with bricks. He huffs, he puffs, he climbs down the chimney and lands in boiling water, and the pigs live happily ever after in a brick house. In the other version, the police come to arrest the wolf and they send him to jail. He was completely framed, in his opinion, since the story's in his point of view. It does not have a happily ever after ending. He's currently in jail telling you the story. So that is how I compared and contrast and organize those story elements into my chart. Tomorrow, you're going to choose two other versions of the Three Little Pigs. So any of the stories that you've read besides the two that I just modeled, so that you can practice comparing and contrasting the same way. You're going to be using your story element charts to help you do this. So make sure you go back into your notes from last week so that you can have them as a reference. Remember that sometimes a story element may have some things that are different and also share some things in common, like the problem in the two stories that I compared and contrasted. If that's the case, record the differences on the left and right and the similarities in the center. Okay, I look forward to seeing which stories you choose. Make sure that you choose two stories that are different than the two stories that I chose. Again, I want to see how you can compare and contrast independently. When you're done with that assignment, make sure you turn it in so that I can assess it. All right, I'm looking forward to seeing how you compare and contrast.